me see. Who has tried hitchhiking in your life? Please raise a hand. Okay, quite a few of you. So perhaps you'll be understanding why we have chosen to travel in such a way.
It all started this way. You know, there are very hard times in your life when you just fed up with everything you do. You want to grab your backpack and hit the road the very next day, going east or maybe west. Well, that didn't happen to us. It was actually very opposite. We were very happy living our peaceful lives. Me, myself, I have just finished university and looking for my new perfect job. And Evelina, she was doing her own interesting work. But something inside of us was urging to challenge ourselves harder, to take on some adventure. And so we told our parents, we're not pursuing any career plans. Actually, quite opposite. We're leaving everything today and we hitting the road for a year and a half.
Bear in mind, we were as ordinary as anyone in the crowd, having only some experience of hitchhiking and backpacking, so you can only imagine our parents' reaction when we announced that we are going away to setting off and gambling with the fate. But for us, it was not as risky. We thought we are going to explore a little bit about the world and ourselves, on a tight budget, of course.
And so we crossed 6 continents, making in total 72,000 kilometers, paddled Mississippi River for another 700 kilometers, walked numerous miles in taigas and savannas, survived miserable cold, freezing cold times, camping on frozen lakes, or actually opposite, survived the sweaty, hot environments in rainforests.
We have learned a lot, more than we could ever expect it. We were given to understand not only about economics, politics, environmental issues, but also what does it mean to have or not to have a home, or to find a new one every day. We also learned how to live with uncertainty, and we experienced the time in a very different ways. We've seen some rotten parts of the world, but also so much beauty and goodness amidst that. So we want to share today with you about that.
Hitchhiking in many countries is a foreign concept. You normally get into someone's car and you pay a price. But in some other countries, it used to be a very popular way of traveling. But now it could be called a dying art, though, with cheap flights, even cheaper bus journeys. Carpooling seems to be the easiest ways from getting from A to B. And crime stories in media, uprising in individualism in Western societies doesn't help to build the trust as well. So youth these days rarely bothers to go out of town and to hold a thumbs up.
When you hitchhike, you always risk, because there are some weird characters out there. In less than 10 seconds, you've got to decide whether you're gonna join a companion for another hour or day. But also, the driver has to decide whether you will do no harm to him. So it is an intense moment when you've got to test your intuition, but not the superstitions.
In many cases, it's the least trusted people that open their souls the most. It is sometimes the guy with a tattoo on the neck and a smoking cigarette to tell you the most interesting story of his life, and not the guy in a suit and a Porsche car. Actually, sports cars are best to be avoided when you do hitchhiking, but that's for the future stories. Still, a line between trust and being naive is very thin. But if you do manage to make a connection right there, you suddenly open new doors to the world that's very different from what a normal tourist sees. Something very raw, very real, different from what might one read in a Lonely Planet book.
So trust was one of the most important values that we consciously or unconsciously picked up on the road. But trust not only in people, but also in the road, in the journey itself. When absolute uncertainty unfolded in front of our eyes, we sometimes thought, were we able to move any further? It was, I believe, a constant struggle with ourselves.
We were robbed twice. Both times we got most of our stuff back. Many times we've had to deal with men who had their own vision how to treat ladies. And after every single bad experience that we faced, we had to make a conscious effort to step back, to go back on the road, and to put a new smile again. But if we didn't trust people, if we didn't start trusting people again, we would have been stuck and no way further.
Openness is another important value that we picked on the road, and best to be put in parallel with learning. It's a matter of breaking and building new core beliefs, and again, and it's not an easy experience. It applies to all of us travelers, but also to the people whom we met on the road.
Being able to accept different challenges every day as a new learning experiences was challenged quite often, very often actually. Many times we spent nights in the most magnificent parts of the world, somewhere in the beach in Australia or next to stunning mountains of Kyrgyzstan. But many times we also slept in places we could never have imagined ourselves spending a night there, under lonely bridges, next to noisy highways, next to a pile of rotting bananas, or in barns.
Switching between hell and heaven, and those temporary stops we had to call our home for a year and a half. And one might wonder what rotten banana is related to learning. But for us now, home is a very different concept. If you've got a roof, windproof walls, a warm sleeping bag, but most importantly, if you've got peace within yourself to sleep in the most awkward and rough place, perhaps you can call that home.
And to other people we met, it was about being open to us, strangers from unknown country, Lithuania.
It was very difficult. You would think that people are okay to invite to the home.
Especially in Asian countries,
Yeah.
where they have a saying, when a god is in the house also, when the guest is in the house also, the god is in the house. But not every culture is so open and not willing to invite every weirdo inside their homes.
For instance, in China, we were hitching between two mega cities, and we were exhausted, and we were about to find a place where to pitch our tent. So we climbed one grassy hill, only to find out that there was a woman with two daughters looking after orchard. We were very thirsty, so we want some water. But she only showed us to follow her through the narrow streets with red bright lanterns into the tiny small house, single room house. And soon she fetched a bowl of water to wash our hands and feet, and later on she stuffed us with the food and then invited billion of neighbors, to celebrate the encounter, despite the fact that we couldn't communicate each other's language. So we had to draw and to tell our adventures and our maps, just in order to tell a little bit about our story. But for them, and later on, the father actually went to the neighbors to sleep, leaving their bed to us, and mother was sleeping together with the daughters. It's not a common practice in Chinese culture, so they actually managed to open up their home door, and share that with us. Whereas we were surprised that many people in different countries all across the globe, in Sudan or Indonesia, in Australia, Brazil, in Venezuela or Malawi, they were opening the doors for us, and we were very grateful for that.
And it wasn't just about common people. Institutions you would think the least about were curious enough about what these shabby-looking creatures from another planet are about to tell them, what new tales we could teach them. And army and firefighter brigade in Guatemala, police and ambulance in Turkey had little doubts about hosting us for a night. Army in El Salvador called the local stadium to open their doors and to host us, so we could pitch a tent inside the stadium where it could be safer for us to camp. And when we had these nights, when we stayed with the policeman in Turkey, we were giggling to ourselves, thinking, can you imagine being hosted by some policeman in Lithuania or anywhere in Europe, being fed with olives, cheese, and bread, being cracking nuts with a policeman's gun, being told their crazy stories from their personal lives. Well, that was a very interesting experience, I may say.
Also, besides being open to each other and also trusting each other, giving was another important value that we learned on the road. Can anyone imagine an old car driven by drunken frontier guards in the middle of Turkmenistan? They dropped us off somewhere in a known city, and we're only 1 hour to go until the border, and our visa was about to expire, and the fine is atrocious if you're actually late, and you don't want to mess with Turkmeni officials. So I was really terrified and scared, and Karolis showing to me that, pretend that you are actually confident because, you will attract some wrongdoers. And amidst all that chaos, one guy stopped to us, even though we didn't hitchhike him. So quickly got into the car, and later that guy explained that some time ago he came to Scotland to study. He felt actually very scared and lonely, and one Scotsman fellow, he came to him, he fetched him home, he fed him, he bought a ticket to his university. So young Turkmen never forgot what the Scotsman done to him. So when he saw us, lost and vulnerable, well, actually, I probably couldn't pretend very well that I was all fine, so he gave us a lift, just because he wanted to extend that chain of goodness.
Social psychologists say that when someone is in need of help, and in the vicinity there is more people to give a hand, it's often the case that people pass this responsibility to someone else. But many times we felt quite opposite. Let's say in Mexico, very often drivers would stop and say, kids, the road is very dangerous. No one is going to stop for you here, so I do. Despite the fact that we would ever hardly have to wait more than 15 minutes.
And Iranians would go further than that, having no concept what hitchhiking is all about. They would stop and ask if they can help somehow, in some way. So if they wouldn't drive the same direction we were going, they would actually buy us a ticket, bus ticket, or would bring us home to share dinner with their relatives. So barefoot travelers actually sing praises to ordinary Iranian people. And perhaps they are the most hospitable people in the world.
And these people we met on the road, they were everything for us at the time. They were our best friends. They were our guides, our philosophers, our grandmas at the time, trying to stuff us with food.
So they were everything. And sometimes, some situations, people were just giving something that they even didn't have. For instance, we were walking in Malawi, and again, it was a hot day, we were very tired, and crowds of people were passing somewhere to a funeral, and there's one guy actually on his bike. Normally in Africa, very often people asked us money, because I don't know, they thought that we were bags of money, but this guy actually stopped and asked how we were. Oh, you're walking to Kota Kota, that's very far. Soon he disappeared. Even sooner he came back with a bowl of fresh peanuts. That's all I can give to you. Take it. And now I've got to go to funeral. We were standing with that bag of peanuts, and he didn't realize how much that bag of peanuts meant to us at that time. He had so little, but he gave so much to us. Sometimes we have too many things in order to appreciate that. But when you travel, you've got only few things. So anything does to you, it's actually a very huge, huge gift.
We face many different forms of sharing and giving. And we were thinking to ourselves many times, why people are so good. Are they doing this because they're desperately lonely and needed a friend at the time? Or maybe they felt part of our adventure? Or maybe they just did it because of sake of humanity and goodness? We still don't know the answer, and we still keep asking this question.
Do you remember that Turkish truck driver when he stopped in the middle of the road, quickly packed us lunch and then gave us a hug, like we were very old good friends, but actually we only knew him for like a couple hours. But that night we're walking down the street and we both were sobbing because up to the end of the journey we couldn't understand why people make any good to a stranger, to a person that they don't know. Well, had not those people of the world who actually helped to move us further, our journey would have finished without even starting. We don't know whether our small social experiment can prove anything at all, but for us it was a different kind of pattern that we would like to adopt ourselves. If more and more people would share the same views, soon we would have a very compassionate society.
And now, after the journey is over, and we have a hot shower every day, a bed, we try to give it back to the world, let it be in the smallest ways, telling stories to kids around the fires, or actually today, speaking here to you, telling you all these stories of people around the world. I myself, while traveling, found a passion for care towards natural environment, so dedicating my time creating tools to understand it better and to bring people closer to nature.
And I try to use my psychological background and art therapy background to work with people with mental health issues, but also I do my volunteering bit with homeless people. So I still travel. I'm still on the road hearing stories, appreciating life. But journey is all around us. It's just up to us whether we will travel with open eyes and compassionate souls. And it's up to us whether we would like to extend that chain of goodness. Thank you very much.